All right, it is our favorite time of the week again. Time for hashtag Rise and Q's, where we get to answer your questions. Let's go ahead and throw the first one up on the board. All right, Saagar, you want to read it?
Both of you, Kyle Kalinske, have mentioned how the progressive left has continuously failed to use leverage versus the corporatist Dems, e.g. Biden, Pelosi. But surely they are aware of this? Question mark. If so, why choose to or intentionally resign to be co-opted? I think that's for you, Krystal.
I think that is a very good question. I mean, look, I don't want to play like psychoanalysis of the progressive left. I did interview, though, Pramila Jayapal here on the show this week and asked her basically like, all right, what's the plan? Right? You actually tried to stand up a little bit. I thought it was, it was a little wishy-washy, like let's send a strongly worded letter asking for a pause, not even asking for specific demands. This after a number of other relief bills have passed that everybody essentially went along with. And she said, look, we got to regroup and we have to be more comfortable. I'm paraphrasing. We have to regroup and we have to be more comfortable challenging the institutions. And I think that's really the dynamic. It is very hard and very uncomfortable to be painted as a villain. I think the right, I've been contemplating this a lot. I think the right is in some ways more comfortable being painted a villain by the media because there's this distrust.
We're always the villains.
Right. Right. Exactly. And there's this distrust. There's this distrust of the media. There's not a thought of like these are my people and like this is my team. So when the media, if you're on the left, and I certainly see this firsthand, and the quote-unquote liberal media is going after you, that's harder to bear. It's a more uncomfortable position to be in, and they have more power within the Democratic base. I mean, that's one of the lessons of the primaries. They really had more power with the base, so it is harder to do. It is harder to go up against, and if you are willing to be painted as the villain, there's, you can end up getting crushed. It really can happen. So there needs to be a lot more work done, not only in alternative media spaces, but also to sort of push the message within the Democratic base of exactly what the ideology and the commitment to the status quo that exists in the mainstream media is.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, which is that, you have to be willing to be hated by the media, by your own party, by a lot of people. And I think that a lot of these people, it's like you said, look, we were born in the hatred and we were molded by it. And a lot of these, guys, they're like Batman getting in the cave. They don't know what they're doing in the dark. So.
All right, let's see the next one. I think this one is more for you, Saagar. Okay. What would be the top policy priorities of a national populist campaign platform? What do you think, sir?
So people ask me this a lot. A lot of it is not formulated. But what I would say is, number one, is it would be all about trade. And that's why I think the trade is probably the biggest issue when it comes to that. You see a little bit of inklings of this. Senator Josh Hawley gave a big speech this week advocating for the U.S. to withdraw from the WTO. I think that's exactly something that would be the very top of the priority, completely reordering the U.S. trading relationship, not just with China, but the entire world. I think number two would be on taxes. So on national populism would be much more about reorienting the tax code away from the kind of the corporatism that we saw in the 2017 tax cuts towards things like child tax credits and using the tax code. People ask me whenever I criticize UBI, this was part of it, was talking about how using the tax code to incentivize the behaviors that as a society we recognize are good for everybody. And number three, some people won't want to hear this, immigration restriction. That's like, if I had to put it all, I put it as trade, taxes, and immigration. That would be the three top.
Where would antitrust fall in your priorities? Because that seems pretty significant too.
It's very big for me, but it's not something necessarily that everybody agrees on. So I'm saying across national populism is like a big thing.
Part of the piece that has been missed on the left and the right is the importance of local community and how that is a value in and of itself, and that small business piece ability to be able to compete and not get quashed by the big guys.
There's a big fight on this, and I'm very sympathetic to both sides. Both are friends, which is the antitrust community talks about small business. That's the one that we should incentivize, all of that. But the other counter is that if you want to actually be pro-worker, to be legitimately pro-worker, most people work for big businesses with employees over 500, employer firms that employ over 500 people. So it's actually better to not just incentivize or keep bigness, but to regulate bigness and the ways that they treat their workers. Like I said, I think both are legitimate positions.
The problem is if you only have in any given town, like basically, Walmart and a couple and like fast food restaurants you can work at, that's a very bad position for workers to be in because they have no options.
Right.
So you have no power in that situation. You can't take your labor somewhere else. So monopoly is actually really bad for workers. And also these giant corporations have become so good and effective and vicious about crushing any efforts to unionize. So you don't have that access to power either. So then you're just wholly dependent on the government regulating properly. And I think it's much better for the sort of balance of power to be leveled out so that workers actually have some solidarity.
So I agree with you. I'm much more on the pro-antitrust side of things. I totally see where the big business guys are coming from. They're just like, no, look, we can bolster rights. But my counter is I'm very cynical about politics, and you allow that much bigness in the economy, they're always going to have a whole lot of influence no matter how you want your idealized state to be.
That's exactly right.
All right, let's throw up the third one there and see what we got. Pretty standard. But on a light note, who are your favorite U.S. presidents and which presidents are underrated?
I mean, people aren't going to be surprised. I'm a big FDR fan. We talk about FDR a lot here. Biden trying ridiculously to claim that legacy as if he's going to be the next FDR. Underrated, I think maybe LBJ is a bit underrated because his record was so tarnished by the Vietnam War. But in terms of, first of all, how he snapped into action the moment that, and you and I both read the biographies, the moment of JFK's death, I mean, he just leapt into action, like literally on the plane, working the phone, getting the pieces in place, drafting the speech, all of that. And, obviously in civil rights, obviously on social programs. So I would say because of, justifiably the way that Vietnam tarnished his legacy, he has been somewhat underrated.
Yeah, absolutely. The Years of Lyndon Johnson, Robert A. Caro, some of the best books.
Phenomenal
changed
books.
My life.
Yeah.
For me, my favorite presidents are Abraham Lincoln and FDR as well. So those are two of the ones. First, obviously, save the Union, made it so that I could be a citizen in this country. Number two was FDR for changing the relationship of the government to its citizens and really responding to the crisis in a way that made America best. And we have taken for granted in our history of having great leaders in times of immense crisis. And maybe you can see right now whatever happens when you have both sides not necessarily being able to figure out how to capitalize on something as a result of discrete choices. Now,
he set the direction for decades to come.
Absolutely. And then in terms of my underrated presidents, John Quincy Adams, he gets zero credit completely. Monroe Doctrine really solidified America and its role in the world and how we were to integrate and think about the European powers. He set the course for American foreign policy, basically all the way up until the breakout of World War I. Number two, Ulysses S. Grant. Grant is one of the most criminally underrated presidents in American history, both for his actions during the Civil War, but really in trying to put an end to the Indian-American War and trying to integrate Native populations into American society in a non-warlike way. And he just doesn't get nearly as much credit for trying to path and pave a good way forward through Reconstruction. There's Ron Chernow just wrote a great biography of him released a couple of years ago. It's like 1,000 pages, but it's totally worth it. So
I will check that out.
Those are my two answers. Also, there's a series coming out on Grant and the History Channel, produced by Leo DiCaprio. The preview looks amazing. It's like a live action interspersed with interviews thing. Everybody go check it out.
All right. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a video. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you back here soon.